Good evening, everybody. Welcome to my garage. This is the first time you've been in here. It's a work in progress. I'm getting over my hoarder, truck parts, hoarding habits in order to make space that I can actually get things done in here. Tonight I am working on shortening the drive shaft, the rear drive shaft to be specific, for my 86 crew cab project. This truck started out as a two-wheel drive automatic with a 6.2 liter diesel. I converted it. It's now four-wheel drive. It's still automatic. It has an NP205 transfer case, and I also switched it over. It now has a 454 big block gas engine in it. So tonight my project at hand is to shorten. It has a two-piece rear drive shaft. I'm going to shorten the front section between the carrier bearing and the output yoke of the transfer case. Adding the transfer case makes it about 12 inches longer. Well, the drivetrain 12 inches longer. The drive shaft needs to be about 12 inches shorter than it was from the factory. So I'm going to work on getting that shortened up, and then I'm going to take some measurements probably on another day. I only have about an hour and a half out in the garage tonight to make sure that all my U-joint angles in that rear shaft are nice so I don't get a vibration when I drive this thing. I've been working on this project for about a year and a half now. Like I said, it started out pretty rough, but I'm happy with where it is. I'm also at the point that I have other projects that I want to get started on, so I'm trying to get this one finished up in the very few spare evenings, hours, blocks of times that I can dedicate to it so I can start on the next one. So let me get under the truck. I'll show you what we're doing exactly, and then we'll get started on this thing. I'll show you how I learned to shorten a drive shaft. I don't have the equipment to balance it, but I do have everything I need to shorten it, make sure the yokes are lined up, and then get it to my local machine shop and they can actually spin balance it for me and make sure it's good to go. Here we go, guys. I hope you enjoy. All right, everybody. Hopefully there's enough light that you can see under here. Like I said, I'm working by myself out in the garage. I don't have a big fancy garage or crazy fancy lights. I'm working with what I have. So let me show you what I'm talking about under here, and then we'll get a mark made on our drive shaft so we can measure, and then we'll crawl out from under the truck, get an accurate measurement of how much shorter we need to make this thing, and get to work on the actual cutting and welding. So underneath of here, like I said, this truck started out as a two-wheel drive truck. So originally, the output yoke of the transmission was roughly in this area here. Now, because I added the transfer case, that made the drivetrain longer and moved the output yoke back about 12-13 inches, okay? So I've already bolted the front U-joint of the drive shaft into the yoke. So I know that's where it's gonna be. What I need to do is move back here and try not to drop this drive shaft on my face, and hold the drive shaft up and use a piece of soapstone to mark the center of where the carrier bearing rides on this thing, okay? So this little somewhat clean black spot you see here is where the carrier bearing rests against the cross member. So I'm going to mark the center of that with my soapstone, and then I'm going to unbolt this drive shaft, get out from underneath the truck, take a measurement, and then cut off the front yoke, shorten the shaft, and then weld it back in. Let me set you up here. I'll move the tripod back a little bit so you can see what I'm doing, and we'll get a mark made. Okay, so we've got our drive shaft up. I'm gonna get right underneath of it. Now, these holes are slotted. They're about 1.5 inches long, so my measurement doesn't have to be you know, insanely within 1/1000th of an inch accurate. I'm just going to mark here my eyeball center of where that carrier bearing rode before. And then I'll get the drive shaft unbolted and we'll come out from underneath of this thing to actually do our cutting and welding where we can see what's going on. Okay guys, so let me explain to you how we're going to do this. The first thing I did is I put the whole drive shaft back together, the front and the rear piece. There's a slip yoke here in the middle. This slip yoke has a blind spline on it, so it will only go on one way. I really didn't need to do that because of that blind spline, but it's going to help me make sure everything is straight when I get this put back together, and I'm going to explain why. So my white mark here is where I need the new center of my carrier bearing to be. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to measure from my white line to the center of my carrier bearing. I'm going to write that number down to make sure I don't forget it. Then I'm going to come down to this end of the drive shaft. This is the very front where it bolts to the transfer case. I'm going to cut this weld. And I'm going to shorten the actual drive shaft tube by the amount that I measured over here. Then I'll get everything laid out flat on the floor. I'll make sure my U-joints are in time with each other, that they're all parallel and lined up again. And then I'll do 4 tacks around the outside diameter. I'm going to reuse the same yoke. I'll do 4 tacks to make sure it doesn't twist as I weld it. And then I'll go through and I'll weld it back together in little 1.5 inch sections all the way around the diameter of the tube. That's really the synopsis. I'm going to set you up so you can see everything that I'm doing, and I'll give you a little update each step of the process just so you understand exactly what's going on. Okay, here we go. Okay, I've gone all the way around. I'm just peeking in to see. There's some places where I can see the 2 pieces of metal. There's some places where I can't yet. There's some places where the weld bead is a little bit thicker. It's a lot easier to take off more than it is to put it back. So take your time, make small cuts, check, cut, check, cut, and then the next hardest part of this is going to be actually getting the yoke knocked out of the tube. I've never been able to completely perfectly cut it, but this will get close enough that I should be able to knock the yoke out with a hammer. Alright, so I've got my hammer. Actually, I'm going to switch you up here because I'm right-handed. It's going to be easier for me to have it. Yeah. Okay, I switched you up. It's going to be easier for you to see what I'm doing this way. But I'm going to drive on the back of the yoke ear here to separate the yoke from the drive shaft. You're not going crazy because you don't want to damage or distort your yoke, but some moderate taps should be enough to get it to move. If it doesn't move, then you cut a little bit more. There we go. Just like that. Doesn't take a lot. You can see here, I actually got pretty good on this one. I barely dug into the cast part of the yoke. I cut right through the weld, right in the center of it, between where the tube meets the yoke. You know, generally if you aim for the center of the weld, that's going to be where the tube and the yoke meet. So now that I've got this piece off, I can measure my 10.5 inches that I need to shorten it by from the end right down this direction. I'll use a piece of paper to wrap around and make sure I cut it straight. Then I'll cut it off, get my yoke put back on in alignment, and the next step will be getting it as true as possible and welding it. Yeah, so here we go. Piece of paper. The reason you get the piece of paper is you know it's square and straight. So you wrap it around your spot where you need to make your cut, and then you can adjust in tiny increments until when you wrap it around tight, your edge lines up the whole way around, just like that. Now I'm going to mark this with a Sharpie because my soapstone is a little light. And I'm just going to go all the way around, making myself a mark so I know exactly where to cut. I know my cut's going to be nice and straight. Then the next step, after I get this cut made, is going to be to clean up my edges. I want to make sure my edge on my shaft here is good. I want to make sure my yoke is nice and clean, because the key to any good weld is prep. If you don't have good prep, you won't have a good weld. There we go. Alright. Now we got a nice straight mark all the way around. Now we can cut it off. Our drive shaft will be shortened. And then all we'll have to do is our prep work for our welding. There we go. Drive shaft about 10.5 inches shorter. Now, you can see right here, there's a weight for balance. And like I said, I had planned on getting this drive shaft rebalanced anyway. Just me moving the yoke and welding on it again is enough reason that it needs to be rebalanced. But definitely, when you see a weight on there, you know you need to take the shaft, you need to get it spin balanced at someone you trust, reputable machine shop, or just someone that knows how to do it. So now I'll do all the heavy work here as far as getting it short, but once I have it done, I'll take it to the machine shop and have them spin balance it again and make sure everything's true, straight, not going to give me any issues driving down the road. So now all we need to do is we'll prep our edge here, grind a little bevel, make sure we have it nice and cleaned up. We'll do the same on the yoke. We'll grind off the old weld. We'll make sure we have everything cleaned up. I'll buff off the inside here to make sure it fits nicely into the tube. We'll get it trued back up just like it was before. And then we'll get this thing welded back up. Okay, everybody, here we go. We're up on the workbench. My workbench is a mess. I've got 15 different things going on all the time. But we're up on the workbench. We're gonna get our tube prepped. We're gonna get our yoke prepped. And then we're gonna weld them back on the floor because that's the straightest, truest area that I have. I don't want to remove a ton of material, so I'm just using a sandpaper disc on my little buffing tool here. I just want to get it down to nice, clean metal on both surfaces. Okay. All right, I'm happy with how that's cleaned up. I'm happy with how my shaft is cleaned up here. So now we can see this is a press fit yoke. So what I'm gonna have to do is get the shaft put back onto the back half, get it timed up, get this yoke timed to the other joints, and then mark it. And then I'll have to put it in the press to actually push this shaft back down into this yoke. Yeah. So let me get this jigged back up over here into the shaft, and then we'll get it marked and ready to go. Okay, so I have steel plate. It's nice and flat under this yoke. We're going to use a steel plate under this yoke as well. That way, I'll know that these two yokes are lined up. They're true to each other. At least as close as I can get it. That one's good. That one's good. Grab our marker here. What we're gonna do One mark there. One mark there. And then we'll put them. That way I know the difference. I know which mark goes with which mark. So now I'll go over here. I have to move some stuff out of the way of my press, and then we will get this thing pressed together. Let's do it. Okay, so my press is not quite as tall as I thought it was. So we're having to adjust our strategy a little bit here. We need to get this U-joint out of the yoke in order for it to fit in the press. So if you've never done this before, you can start by squeezing it. That'll help kind of break the crusty rusty loose. And then take yourself a flathead screwdriver and you can roll the joint out. You can also squeeze, and then if you can get your other hand in there, start your little clip with your screwdriver that way. There's lots of ways to do it. Yeah, more than likely that's going to happen and you're not going to have any clue where the little snap ring went. I'm going to replace these U-joints anyway because, oh, when you get lucky, that happens. Because I don't know how long these U-joints have been in here. I mean, there's no grease fittings. They spin smoothly, but I mean, for all I know, they're the original 1986 U-joints. So, once you get your snaps off, you get your, if you have it, a press. If not, I mean, a hammer and some sockets works. It's a little less controlled and a lot noisier, but it'll do the job. So you get your press lined up here. You double check and make sure that your joint is going to be clear to push through. You make sure your U-joint is straight. You don't want to push it up against the sides of the yoke. And then you can push on it. Let's see here. Yeah, see, so we came off center. We're just trying to crush the U-joint. That won't work. So we need to loosen, and we need to get our press lined up where it needs to be. Okay, I think we got it now. I think we got it now. There we go. So, you press as far as you can. Something to grip your cap with. Need some vice grips. So, you can get your vice grips locked on there. And if it still won't move, like this one, we'll give it a little heat. All right, everybody, so here's where we're at. We fought with it for a few more minutes. We managed to get the U-joint out of the yoke. Took it over to the press, and of course, the press is still like a ½ inch too short. So what I'm going to try to do I don't know if this is going to work or not, is get this yoke started just enough into this shaft that I can fit it in the press to finish getting it in the rest of the way. I don't know if this is going to work or not. I've got the shaft on a piece of wood down here so I don't mess up the splines on the other end. And I've got my marks lined up to keep it in time. That's probably not going to matter. I don't think it's going to get stuck. But if anything, I mean, it looks like it's got to swell this shaft out by about, man, 1/4 inch by the time it's fully seated. So we'll see what we can do here. I'm going to give it a few raps with the hammer, see what happens. Made a loud noise. Man, wouldn't it have been cool if it just popped in like, oh yeah, this is where I want to be. Drive shafts I've done this with in the past have not had a press fit yoke like this. So this is, we're learning together on this one. Yeah, that's pretty darn good right there. All right, let's go take another sample, see if it fits in the press. Still doesn't fit. So, I mean, it looks like at this point we're just going all the way with the swing press. I'm going to get it tapped the rest of the way in there, and then I'll bring you guys back for the welding. Hang tight. Okay guys, so I think I just didn't cut as straight as I thought I did along the edge here. It's pretty darn true from what I can tell. It looks, the tube is expanded as far as visually as I can tell, like exactly evenly all the way around. I had a couple pieces of 2x4, set them up parallel and rolled them, and the yoke itself seems to be spinning true with the shaft as far as I can see. I don't have a good way to jig this up to get a micrometer or a dial indicator on it to really know, like, am I 2/1000ths out? Am I 3/1000ths out? But for doing this in my garage with what I have available, like I said, it's going to be close enough. I'm still going to take it to the Driveshaft shop. They'll get it tuned in perfect. This truck is just going to be a cruiser. I mean, with a 3-speed automatic transmission, it's rarely going to see more than 55 or 60 miles an hour anyway. So, I mean, I'm going to call it good. I'm going to get the welder out. I'm going to put my tacks on this thing, and then I'll get it welded all the way around, and I'll set you guys up so you can watch. We're getting super close on this thing. I'm not going to be able to install it tonight. I don't have, actually, I might have a fresh U-joint that I can get put into this end. So I'll check also and see if I have that U-joint. If I do, we'll get it installed tonight. If I don't, then we'll have to do that in another video. But yeah, let me get all the tools out. Let me get the welder out, and we'll get this thing finished up. Alright guys, I've got the welder set up here. It's nothing special, it's just a Miller 220 volt, I can't even remember, Ironman 250. I've had it for, geez, 10 or 15 years now. It's been a very reliable welder. It's served me faithfully and without issue. So I've got my ground clamp on down here on the opposite end. Rubbed it through, gave it a little spot to make some good contact. I don't have it on the splines of the slip yoke because I don't want it to arc and mess those splines up. So I'm going to get my wire fed out here to a little fresh wire. I'm going to grab my cutters real quick and just snip that off. Got an old end on my wire. Jeez, my tip is filthy. There we go. Much better. We'll actually have some gas coming out of there now. So, I'm going to get this thing tacked, like I said. One on each corner. Well, you know, about 90 degrees apart from each other. And then I'll weld it fully around about an inch or so at a time. Go. She's all the way around. A little heavy on the wire, but I'll probably leave it as is and let the Driveshaft shop go ahead. They'll be able to dress the welds in the lathe if they need to. A lot of times they'll do that as a preliminary stage of balance. I'll hit this with my buff wheel real quick just to knock all the little slag drops and everything else off of it. But, I mean, I feel good. Finally got this project done. It's been, you know, the 80-20 rule. The last 20% of the work takes 80% of the time. And it's been true with this project. So I'm glad to be one step closer. I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, hit this with a little buffer wheel. And then I actually did have another U-joint handy. So I'll stick the new universal joint in this thing. And then we'll stick it up in the truck just to see how it fits. I'll bring you back here in a few minutes, guys. I think first thing first, let's get our U-joint up into our yoke. Let's get a little bit more light. There we go. Okay. So, there we go. We got one lock washer and nut.
Yeah, let's get the other one started. Lock washer and a nut.
Again, guys, like, it doesn't have to be 10,000 horsepower street rod approved for what I'm trying to do with this truck. It's just going to be a cruiser. At this point, I just I really need to get myself for a drive in it. I mean, the engine, transmission, and transfer case have been in this thing for 8 months, and I haven't taken the, like I said, that 80-20 rule, the 20% of the time that's left in this thing, or the 20% of the work that's left to do on this thing, to get it done so I can just drive it. All I want to do is cruise it. Just take it for a ride around the block. Use this to haul scrap to the scrap yard once in a while. Like, it's not a show truck. I mean, it's a stock 1985 454. So, I mean, geez, it makes like 300 pound-feet of torque and 189 horsepower. Like, it's not a earth-shattering, mind-blowing, like, high horsepower engine. It's really just a A to B, haul some heavy stuff when on the occasion that you need to truck. It's only a turbo 400 3-speed. It doesn't even have overdrive. So I mean, with the 410 gears and the axles, top speed on this thing is going to be like 65 miles an hour. All right, so here we go. Moment of truth. Let's see how this thing lines up. Oh man, like it never even came off. Measurements were right on the nose. Let's see if I can get this carrier bearing collar up on there real quick, just to hold it in place. That one's stuck. That one's stuck. All right, so we gotta go grab the right size wrenches real quick. There's one. There's another. Okay. So let's see here. Get this pushed right up on. Get a bolt with a washer. Oh man, that's right. These were kind of a pain. All right, we got one. We got two. All right, I should have brought the air impact under here. That's okay. All right, let's get the 5/8. Whoopsie. There we go. All right, there's the blind spline. Okay, so there we go, guys. It is in. We've got our transfer case end. She's got a little bit of a wobble. Definitely not perfect, but I think it'll work just fine for our purposes. Now the reason I did it this way is so that I only had to shorten one piece of the shaft, and I should be able to still use the factory back piece. This carrier bearing and this spline for the slip joint are in the exact same place that they were from the factory. In the rear, the truck is lifted just about 3 inches, but that should be low enough that the factory shaft still has plenty of spline engagement, and it's nothing to worry about. If it's not, then I'll have to get the rear shaft lengthened, but I want to get it in here and test fit it first and see how everything looks before I worry about actually getting that shaft lengthened. So I think that's going to be it for tonight. It's already way past my bedtime. My wife went to bed a little while ago. So thanks a lot for joining me. I'm going to get cleaned up, and I will see you next time. Thanks a lot, guys. Okay, everybody, so thanks again for joining me out in the garage tonight. Got the rear shaft. I wish I had another U-joint. I would sling that in there also, but I'm missing the cap on this end. So I'll have to get a new joint, and then I'll get that stuck up in. And then the only other thing we'll have left to do on this truck before it's ready to go is exhaust and clean all the junk out of the bed that I've had sitting in there. You may be wondering, why is it sitting on steel rims without tires on it? Because that's the only way I could fit it in and out of my garage. I really like this garage, but the garage doors are shorter than I would like them to be. But yeah, thanks a lot for joining me. Hope you learned something. Like I said, this is not a race truck. This is not a show truck. This is a drive once in a while, 55, 60 miles an hour top speed, just a cruiser. Not a ton of power. It's just something that I've always wanted to have, a crew cab square body. I managed to get this one in 2-wheel drive. We get winter weather. You never know what's going to come up. I may use it to haul firewood or something, or go camping. So I really wanted it to be 4-wheel drive. That's why I converted it. That's why I'm doing all this work on it. So if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe. I'll be sharing more tips, tricks, things that I've learned, and projects that I'm working on. And thanks again for joining me. Have a great night. Come on. You gotta be kidding me.